All right. Well, welcome and good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's call. My name is Olivia. I'm a network manager at Climate Caucus, and I'm calling you all today from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people. And so, as you likely know, for today's session, we're joined by Mayor Dan Kutcher of Summerside, PEI, a national leader in renewable energy through a municipally owned utility. Summerside has reduced emissions, invested in clean technology, and launched a landmark solar project. So Mayor Dan Kutcher will speak on Summerside's clean energy transformation, and then afterwards we'll have some time for Q&A and discussion. And so I'm going to be recording the presentation part, but as always, I'll stop recording for once we get into that discussion period. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to you now, Dan. Thanks so much for joining.
Great, thanks, Olivia, and welcome anyone joining there with us online. I hope this is of some value, particularly as municipally elected officials know, that lots of what we present on and talk on, we don't actually aren't actually the ones doing it. So a lot of the great work that I'm going to touch on here, and some of the challenges and opportunities, obviously have nothing to do with me in terms of actually getting them done. But as you know, working as a team is an important piece here, and that's sort of how the role is. So I like to sort of highlight that because sometimes we get recognized, and I'm the one who's out there speaking about it, but always important to recognize the value of the team and the people behind making all of this work. So Olivia, really happy to talk today about our clean energy transformation. It has taken place over about 20 or so years. I have a slide deck that I wanted to use here briefly. Isn't prepared for this presentation, but I think it generally fits. This was actually used to present most recently to the Belgium's ambassador to Canada, who was in Summerside, to find out about what we were doing to be able to take some of that back to Belgium. So I'm going to go through the deck, hopefully relatively quickly, and then open it up for questions and touch on anything else that people want to hear from. So let's see if I can get to the next slide. Here we are. Okay. First, I always like to start with this, because when I arrived in this role, I said these words: if you can't manage it, measure it, you can't manage it. So 3 years ago, like I said, we've been on this clean energy journey for over 2 decades. But 3 years ago, we decided we needed to sit down and actually measure what it is, what the impact is. And so as you can see at a really, really high level here, our per capita GHG emissions per person, the Canadian average is about 17, PEI is about 10, and in Summerside it's under 3, which I think is important. We haven't in Summerside set a hard goal of, by 2035 we're going to achieve net zero, or by 2040, or by 2050. I think we take a little more of a pragmatic approach in terms of making sure that everything that we do integrates the opportunities to try and reduce our carbon footprint, but also meet some of our other objectives that we have as a utility, and there essentially are 3. The first is to make sure that we have reliable, deployable electricity for our residents. That is the energy security component, and particularly today, perhaps more than ever, that is more and more urgent and pressing, given the pace of electrification from a variety of different factors, and also the need to make sure that our residents basically don't have brownouts or blackouts like everybody else are working towards. So the next piece is economic in nature. Our electric utility is a revenue generator for our city. So by generating revenue, obviously we can put it back into the utility to do more and more innovative things, but also it provides a benefit for our ratepayers. What differentiates us, at least in Prince Edward Island, is that our ratepayers see the benefit of owning the utility, whereas the rest of PEI, it is the shareholders of Fortis, which owns Maritime Electric. And then the third, I think, is the moral imperative. So energy security, economics, and then depends who you want to quote, but it's either the right thing to do if it's Bobby Kennedy, or do the right thing if it's Spike Lee. And that's the moral imperative of doing what is right and what is important. And in that case, it is moving us forward in the journey towards decarbonization to help protect not only communities like ours, which sits at the narrowest point of Prince Edward Island, we're 10 to 15 meters as our high point, but communities across the world and for generations that follow us. So obviously, don't need to talk to this group about too much of that. 20 years here in Summerside of innovating in clean technology. It just sort of throws everything on one page. But I'll take you through some of the highlights. Approximately 20 years ago, the city got into wind. Now, the city for years had been one of the municipalities that had held on to its electric utility. For many of those years, we were simply purchasing power from other providers. So MB Power by way of Maritime Electric. 20 years ago, the city got into the generation side. There was federal grants available, and the city jumped on those, built 4 windmills, and then used the revenue actually from that project to actually initiate the building of our community center. That's sort of our centerpiece here in our city. Approximately 5 or 7 years ago, the city moved into solar. 2 years ago, we energized, I think it's now still the largest utility scale solar farm in Atlantic Canada, about 21 megawatts. So put that in perspective, that's about 80 acres or 46,000 panels. And attached to that is an 11 megawatt hour battery. We use the battery to help shave our peak loads, and our peaking loads are the morning and after work. The rest of this slide highlights all the other pieces that go with that. So one of the things we've tried to do as well is look for pilot opportunities within our community. So when I talked about that recreation center, our credit union place, that was funded in part by revenues generated from our wind farm. That's where we built our first small scale solar fields and battery storage system. We tried it at a smaller scale. It worked. We had good partners from other levels of government and the private sector, partnering with Samsung Renewables through that project, showed that it could work, and then exported that to the larger utility scale Sunbank project. Same time, we partner with a company that operates in our city and also in Ottawa called Blue Wave AI. Blue Wave AI helps us manage what our demand load forecast is in real time. So again, I think the value of partnering with private sector expertise does a couple of things. One is it brings an entrepreneurial lens to it, but then it also brings the investment that is one of the benefits of innovation in this space, and has helped our community from a financial perspective by creating new opportunities, and it continues to move the ball forward. Couple other pieces in here. We have a Heat for Less program, so we try and store energy as well in people's homes in a variety of different ways. And we've done all of the sort of the regular, I call them the regular type stuff, but in terms of doing retrofits and energy retrofits on all of our buildings. This is just a quick picture of what this looks like, obviously not to scale, but this is how our city is coming along. With a variety of different both generation, storage, and transformation, distribution, and usage of clean green electricity. Summerside produces approximately 60 to 62% of our own electricity needs from within our municipal boundaries, and that comes from solar and wind primarily. But we also have a number of diesel generators that we use to manage load and have as deployable electricity, something that is necessary as a regulated utility and a player within the wider market. So, but we do talk a lot about the benefits and values of our journey towards decarbonization and clean technology with our wind and solar and our EV pieces and all the other things that we're doing. It is still really important for us to have, in this case, because we're in PEI, we don't have hydro, we don't have nuclear, we don't have natural gas. We still need deployable electricity from assets that we can turn on and turn off. So our diesel generators run for approximately 5% of the time. But we need to make sure that they're there, so when they do need to run, when we have either peaking here or there's disruption on imports, those need to be available. And so those actually also, it's unusual, but by having those assets and not using them, it is also a plus revenue generator because we don't have to then buy excess capacity from somebody else. So we don't need to buy it from NB Power. So they don't have to park. I'm going to try and simplify this, but they don't have to park electricity from somewhere else that they could deploy for us when we have it ourselves. And I think that's important because I often speak at these with whether it's within environmental groups or organizations or municipalities focused on addressing the challenges and the real need to address the challenges associated with the changing climate and the decarbonization journey. But it is important to make sure that we have different assets that can also provide reliable and secure electricity. You see this not just here, but you see this everywhere. There's quite a bit of pushback lately, and whether some of it's justified or not, probably not. But you see this sort of pushback against the energy transformation towards EVs or windmills and solar, compared to some of the traditional fossil fuel generation assets. I think you probably need a bit of both as we continue to on this process of transformation to clean tech, to a cleaner environment in the future. But it's important to touch on. Some of the recent projects that we've done here are the success that we've had with our utility and our path towards sort of net zero or decarbonization or whatever you want to call it has spread to other places as well. We have Atlantic Canada's first passive industrial facility that's on the slide there. And part of our eco park, that building is nearing completion. And then on the right there is just a picture of our solar farm that also interestingly is built on top of our well field. So that was a physical space that was non-developable. We can't put any industrial or commercial or residential build on there, but we can put a solar farm. And so anyway, I always think that's kind of cool. I touched on these a little bit as well. Some of our pilot projects from our first in the world behind the meter smart storage for a large user. One on the left with the tennis courts is the solar project that's attached to our credit union place, our community center. And on the right is our wind farm, which is aging now. So we're at the point where we're in the early stages of how do we replace our wind generation assets and whether or not we expand those to a certain degree. But we've put quite a bit of resources and funding into both maintaining those and finding wins in terms of increasing the ability for those generators, for those wind assets to provide higher amounts of electricity. So it touches on there, but installing these smart vortex generators, don't ask me what that is. We generate, those operate more efficiently. This is in here, just we, a couple years ago, provided Atlantic Canada's first 100% solar power concert, which is kind of cool. Again, that's deploying the energy that was stored in our batteries at our credit union place. That's our community center and our rink. With Brian Adams, I was not at the show. Some of the early barriers that I think transcend and are probably valuable for municipalities and organizations in general that maybe don't own a utility or want to try and move into the space, even at a smaller piece. But organizational culture is obviously something that, at least in the early stages, it takes time to create that sort of entrepreneurial culture within, in our case, a municipality. I think that the path towards decarbonization and the work on the wind and the solar, and our heat for less and all those types of things, I think there has been a significant benefit to the rest of the organization. I often say that we have a higher risk tolerance perhaps than other municipalities, and because we've seen what the benefits are of that. Obviously, our issues with respect to regulations, I'm going to touch on that one too much, but again, when you're a regulated utility, you have to operate within the bigger scheme of transmission, distribution, and generation across, in some cases, North America. Some of the early barriers on short-term thinking, again, a lot of these projects have provided long-term benefits, and there was some great vision that came well before me and the current group who's here today. So in a lot of ways, we sort of carry the torch and try and brighten it as best we can. Lack of resources, it's going to be for everyone. We've had success building partnerships with other levels of government and the private sector in order to generate the funding needed to get some of these projects off. There are shifting priorities. Again, that's something that we're working with right now within the city as we continue to sort of transform as a community and grow. I know a lot of us are growing at incredible rates. And managing sort of some of the traditional thinking and priority setting to new ones. Fear of the unknown, like I said, we have a higher risk tolerance, and I think have seen some of the benefits of that. And the other one there I'd sort of touch on is the fear of failure. I think it's really important to try and eliminate that. You make your best decisions with the information that you have, and be open, honest, and transparent. At least that's how we've always approached this file and how I've always approached this role, and for better or for worse from the political side, but that's how I tend to operate. And always good to break down siloed thinking, because to have success in this, you need a variety of different, even within the municipal structure, you need to have your community works, you need to have your community services, you need to have your finance department. They all have to be able to work together on that piece and understand the goal. I'm going to touch on this. This is sort of starting to our next piece. We're always looking for future investment to be able to continue to take us to the next step. Right now, we have two steps, I'd say, that we're currently engaged in. One is we do have to replace our existing, at least two of our existing diesel generators. We're in the process of initiating that review. We worked with Dunsky, the energy consultant company, who gave us advice to replace those diesel generators and to look at options. The reality is here in Prince Edward Island, as I said, without hydronuclear, the natural gas, geothermal is not an option for us. We have to have some diesel generation, so we are looking to replace those. There's a significant benefit from a carbon mitigation side. The generators today are a lot better than they were when some of the ones that we are replacing created. One of them actually is from an era of being in World War II submarine. So. And then the next piece that we're working on is, again, trying to capture the energy that we have in our community, which is wind and solar to this point, and be able to store that and then deploy that as needed. So that's the real rub for us, because if the wind doesn't blow for 4 days and the sun doesn't shine, we are reliant entirely on imports. It is just technically impossible to be able to create enough battery storage to be able to have enough capacity to be able to deliver to meet peaking loads. So what we've been working on and continue to do so is exploring green hydrogen. The transformation, obviously, of using wind and solar to split hydrogen, and store it and then be able to deploy it in a generator. So, but as you can see on this piece here, it's still relatively new technology is happening elsewhere in the world, and there has been some success. And I think I was reading today that I think just outside of Montreal, there's a new project, but both the from the electrolyzer to the storage and the movement of hydrogen from one place to the other, and that's sort of parking also some of the issues of safety, but it seems to be coming along. And then having a hydrogen powered generator. Ideally, if there was the technology there to be able to have a dual fuel, which would be hydrogen and something else, that would help us in that path. But right now where we're at is we've been working both with the federal and provincial governments and private sector to explore if we can't do what we've done before, which is try and pilot a hydrogen project here in the city. For me, long term, that is hydrogen will be part of the energy mix, and it's one that long term makes sense for our city and for Prince Edward Island from a generation and distribution discussion. But right now the costs are still so prohibitive. The cost of hydrogen is well beyond others, but If you just use wind or solar, you can really see how that's changed over the years. So that's where we are. That's our path and our journey that we've been following. It is something I think we as a community are really proud of. It's provided significant amount of revenue for our community, and it's given us some independence to be able to manage the issue that all of us face, not just Summerside, not just PEI, New Brunswick, Quebec, Nova Scotia, all of North America, and which is the rapid pace of electrification and the pressure that that's putting on the need to generate new electricity. So Canada Public Policy Forum report I was reading this morning, and I've seen these numbers quite a bit. The expectation is that Canada is going to have to double its generating assets within the next 25 years, at least. And that's massive. That is a century type project. So in order to, it's positive to see the discussions at the national level about trying to get things built. We want to continue to get them built in a way that moves us on the path towards further decarbonization here in our community. But it is for me, when I look around our community, we had a significant incident last year with a failure at a substation that was not ours, but that we are entirely dependent on. And we had going on 6 or 7 days of significant reductions in our electric supply, where we were having, businesses were having to shut down, run backup generators. We were doing load management from residents as well. And so the challenge is real and the pressures are significant. So that's where we are. Our batteries at the time and our wind was really helpful. We would have been into significant rolling brownouts if it wasn't for both of those. But continues to, as we see across the country, the peaks and the valleys are getting higher and lower, and we need to be prepared for it. So that's my quick rundown of what we've been doing, and I always try and stay optimistic. I hope I'm not too realistic as well, but happy to answer any questions if there are any on what we've done and how we may be able to share or export some of that expertise and experience to others.